Hello everybody, Tommyruin here, and today I'm going to be discussing the build process I go through using the example of a build that I tried and tested when I first came back to the server. I mentioned briefly in my previous video, but for those who didn't watch, it is a build that revolved around arcane missiles. Now this video will be a discussion of how I improved, iterated and worked on this build, and the advice will hopefully apply to all the builds that you guys want to go on and build. So I will go over the final list of abilities and talents for the Arcane build, and I'll also go through the talents and abilities that I went through each step, so you can see the progression as I worked on it. Now I tried many things to try and get this build to do decent damage, but bear in mind that I didn't have very good gear when I tested that build. So first I'm going to go over the general processes that I go through. These are steps that I try to apply to every build that I make and generally lead to good results should the initial idea be solid. Bear in mind that every build isn't possible. There are tons of combinations which have not been seen before, and a lot of them are probably competitive, but on the other hand, a lot of them are not seen for a reason. So when I make builds, I go through 3 phases or steps, generally. Step 1 is the initial idea. I find an ability or talent or spell interaction that I like and I do some research into it. I see what supporting talents there are to make it work and what abilities will enhance the idea. One thing you definitely want to look at is random enchants. These make or break builds in my opinion, so you want something that has good support in the form of random enchants. The best way to check this is to download the random enchant add-on, which I will link in the description, and this gives you a way of checking all the random enchants that are in the game, and you can search them based on abilities, so it's really good for weaning out different random enchants you want for certain abilities. And for me, like I said, this ability was Arcane Missiles. Now this was an ability that I got given in wildcard mode, and I hadn't seen it being used at endgame before, or since I've been playing Project Ascension. Now, I knew that there was a legendary random enchant that revolved around casting Arcane Missiles, and when you cast it, that reduced the cooldown on Arcane Power, which is a very good damage boosting cooldown talent. And then there were also random enchants which increased the damage of the ability. Now I personally enjoy finding underutilized specs and trying to make them work, so it seemed like a good fit. I had my ability, I had random enchants, and that was something that I wanted to base my build around. I then looked towards the talent trees, and in this case, Arcane Mage, as I knew there was going to be lots of support there. So you want to see what kind of talents there are that will enhance the build you're looking at, and in the case of Arcane Missiles there were quite a few. Things like Arcane Stability, Arcane Empowerment for example. You want to make a list of things that look good and write out what the ability does. Not only is this helping towards the build that you are using, but it also helps to quicken the process in future builds as you start to learn abilities, where they are and what they do. So you wean out the abilities that you want on different talent trees. For me, firstly, in my first pass of the build, I went full Arcane, investing in lots of talents that work directly with Arcane Missiles. This was the first build I had made since coming back, and I was rusty, so I missed a hell of a lot of good talents, but that's okay. This process is iterative, and each time you work on the build, it gets better. So I'll put a link up to my first pass build in the description so you can see it for yourself, but I made a lot of mistakes. Firstly, picking up things like Arcane Subtlety to reduce threat gen of my build. I thought this would be important, but if you learn to manage threat through abilities like Fade and Feign Death, talents like this aren't necessary and you can save your talent essences. Arcane Meditation was a talent that increases mana regeneration, but using things like Life Tap is far more efficient. It's a far more efficient way of generating mana, and it doesn't require those precious talent essences. Little things like that which eat away at talent essences are things you want to avoid. I also picked up a lot of buff abilities. Now these ability essences can be better managed by investing in things that help you, like Conjure Mana Gem. Generally, if you are raiding, you have good coverage of buffs by just selecting one each, so there's no need to burn through your ability essences and take all the buffs yourself. So that was the build I made. I tried it out and I wasn't too happy. The core gameplay was fine: cast Arcane Missiles, do damage with it, and use Arcane Power when it's not on cooldown, with the amount of casts of Arcane Missiles you do reducing the cooldown of Arcane Power. A very simple spec which worked functionally, but it was not putting out good numbers. I had another look, and that is step 2. Step 2 is to think about what you have done and look for improvements. I went and had a look to see what was not going right with the build and if there was anything that I could change to improve it. I re-looked at the core idea of the build, casting arcane missiles to refresh the cooldown of arcane power. I thought, how can I make this better, and thought, more haste. So I invested in haste talents, things like Netherwind Presence, Gift of the Earth Mother for example. This meant that I could cast arcane missiles faster, leading to a faster refresh of arcane power and therefore a higher uptime on the buff. This did increase the damage, but was still not as competitive as I wanted. I was still making mistakes in my building, and so moved on to step 3, asking for help. One thing I highly recommend people do is ask for help. There are some people out there with so much building experience who pump out some serious damage, healing, or have some solid tanking builds. These people are the ones you want to message, as they are obviously doing something right. These people are often very happy to help and want others to improve. Obviously, some people want to keep their secrets, but most I have spoken to have been happy to look at and suggest and help improve builds that I have been dabbling with. So I reached out to friends and got some advice. They pointed me towards talents I hadn't even considered before, which are so powerful. Once again, this path for the build is listed in the description, but I will go over a few talents I skipped over in previous builds, which are actually really strong. So firstly, Torment the Weak in Arcane Mage. This talent is amazing for mage casters. It increases the damage of most mage spells if the target is slowed or snared. Now in instance PvE environments, usually you will have someone in your group who runs abilities that slow or snare, such as Frostbolt, Blizzard or Thunderclap. This means you'll get 12% more damage on your mage abilities, in my case Arcane Missiles. Now that's a really nice damage buff for 3 talent essences. Adding on to that, ranged weapon specialization in Marksmanship Hunter. This talent increases all damage done by 5% if you equip a ranged weapon. This is very nice, not only because you get 5% extra damage for equipping a ranged weapon, which is a really easy thing to do, but it ties in nicely with Black Arrow from Survival Hunter. Now this talent I had not considered, and it gives you an 8% damage increase on the target for 15 seconds, which is not bad for 1 talent essence. This build did significantly more damage than the previous iteration and just shows how getting a second opinion can help identify things you missed and things you may not have considered. So with this build, in my crapped gear, I was doing around 1.6k DPS. Now that's nothing special, and I would only try this build if you have good gear and the orbs to kind of mess around with REs. But hey, it may work. It may one day be a good, viable raiding build. I hear that the set bonus from AQ leans towards Arcane Mage, so that may be the missing piece of the puzzle. Now this video wasn't meant to be a build video, more of an overview of the processes I go through when I make builds. Build making isn't instant, and very rarely do builds fall into place first time round. They take time and care and thought to perfect, but when they do, it is so satisfying. That's everything from me today guys. Remember to like the video, send me a comment if you have any improvements for the build or any questions, and let me know what you thought of the process. So I'll see you all very soon. Bye bye.